Hello and welcome to the Business of Meaning podcast. I'm your host, Eric Rosenberg. Over the years, I've had the privilege of helping businesses in the meetings and event industry grow and succeed. And I'm excited to share that experience with you. If you feel alone and overwhelmed, and if you're looking to take your business to the next level, improve your strategy and sales, and connect with like minded professionals, you are in the right place. I invite you to visit eventbusinessformula.com and join our community of event business owners dedicated to exponential growth. Now, let's dive into today's episode. Hello, and welcome to a new episode of the Business of Meaning podcast. Today, I'm absolutely delighted to speak with our guest. You know, sometimes you're a fan of an artist, you're a fan of an actor. I'm actually a big fan of a business tool that this guy invented, and obviously he's been developing a lot around innovation. We worked together over 10 years ago on a specific moment that I will detail. Live from Switzerland, the one and only, the man, the legend himself, Alex Osterwalder, CEO of Strategyzer, inventor of the business model canvas and so many other tools. Alex, I'm so happy to speak with you today.
Thanks for having me. Real pleasure to be part of this.
Yeah, it's for those who know me and for the people I'm coaching specifically in the meetings and event industry, they all know about the business model canvas. They all know about your company, but you've done more than that. We're going to talk about it. But just a quick story how we met. When I had the opportunity to become chair of the International Board of MPI, we had the three sources of revenue going down at the same time: membership, the live event, and the print advertising at that time. And we had a strategic session at several days, and you came and you worked with us, and it was absolutely game changing. And we had also Ruth and Rule that were in the board that actually took your program and focused it on the meeting design. But you have been helping millions of people around the world, large companies, small companies. But before getting there, can you briefly tell us what is your story and how did you get there?
It all started with a doctoral dissertation around the topic of business models, together with Yves Pigneur, who was my PhD supervisor. So I put that stuff online, and then people started downloading my PhD. And I didn't know people read PhD theses, so that was great. But that kind of led to me thinking, wait, maybe we should write a book. So I asked Yves, should we do this? And we did it, and we did it our way. I said, we can't write a book on business model innovation without, being innovative. So we came up with an innovative business model. We self-published. We got people to pay us before we even wrote the book. So we did all of that, Kickstarter, crowdfunding before it existed, before it became mainstream, and had a lot of fun in the process and built that, from ground up. And then based on that, I created a Strategyzer. So that's where we are today. And it all started, as a PhD student.
That's wonderful. So you wrote a thesis on business model and it became your business. How did you get to the canvas? How was the thinking process to actually, there have been so many gurus in the business, but how did you get the approach that has been used now by millions of people, as I said?
Yeah, so it looks extremely simple, right? And it is. Now, the funny thing is, to get to simplicity, you need to go through complexity. We didn't just throw a couple of boxes on a piece of paper and said, oh, this is it. It was a real PhD thesis, and the business model canvas is a part that's standing out. So what I did back then, long time ago, was looking at all of the research, all of the stuff that has been done until then on business models, took that, synthesized it into an approach, and then actually tested and iterated that with real business people to figure out, does it help them describe a business model or not? So we stress tested it really, really strongly. And that was before Lean Startup. We kind of did that stuff. And it was fun to merge everything we did with Steve Blank's work and Eric's work. But we tested that, worked really on the visual interface. And that then took off, because that little piece is something I used in consulting when I helped build a consulting firm with a friend of mine. So it took off. And so the simplicity and usability of that tool is not an accident. We designed it by choice and we tested and iterated just like we do with business models today. So that's how we've designed all of our tools. We don't just come up with an idea, throw it on a piece of paper. We really look at what everybody has done in the field, written about it. We turn it into a tool, test it with real people until it works. And that, I think, is part of the recipe of adoption. And then, business models, we kind of got lucky. We hit the zeitgeist, but we were not the only one. So the question is always, why did that tool take off? Because we made it simple, visual, usable, and I loved sharing stuff online, right? So that was the other ingredient, sharing, so people, would adopt and vote with their feet. So that was a fun journey. And literally today, millions of people use it. Unfortunately, I don't earn from every canvas used, but the good news is a lot of people work on their ventures, a lot of large companies work on their stuff, and we figured out a business model to monetize in a different way later on.
So you did like what Elon Musk did with Tesla and the batteries. You just open the technology and share it with everyone.
So it does actually make a huge difference to our business. So at one point, we turned the name of the company to Strategyzer, and that is on every tool, that is on every book, and all of that is available on the internet. So today, 90% of our business is inbound. People come to us. So the free or freemium model, slightly different twist, right? But giving stuff away has been extremely beneficial to us. I wouldn't do what I'm doing today if I hadn't shared so much over time. When it came to our software business, we did have to iterate a couple of times until we figured it out. So basically 2 years ago, we really started to understand how to monetize at scale. Because the easiest is always consulting and training. Not a business I wanted to be in, but we used that detour, consulting large companies, helping large companies with innovation, to move into now a scalable business model that we hope to scale to 100 million in ARR.
You said that you tested and you say, okay, now it's working. What is fascinating to me that you can use it for a startup, you can use it for an association, you can use it for a small business, and you can use it for, you just go online and you will find those examples for Airbnb or Cirque du Soleil, whatever company. When did you know that you had something that really was working and that somehow your thesis was done?
So, the moment I started to see a little bit, I've always paid attention to what got traction. So proactive listening, and also sharing, right? So people would tell us, oh, that's bullshit, that works. They would be and that was fun, right? So you make yourself vulnerable, but you really start to understand what works. But when people download a doctoral dissertation and you ask around you and say, well, that's pretty unusual, then you have something. So that was the first wave. Then I started to give some talks. The YouTube videos got some traction. Then I got invited to other speaking events. So that was a sign, oh, there's something there that people find useful. And then from the model to the business model canvas was a funny anecdote. So I was helping build a consulting firm with a friend, Stefano Mastrogiacomo, who's the author of High Impact Tools for Teams. We were asked to work on an innovative business model for a private bank. So I had this approach, right? Boxes and arrows, a concept. So we put that concept onto a whiteboard and we just drew lines between the boxes and it turned into a canvas. So the conceptual model was not conceived originally as a business tool, as a visual interface. Some would say a template, a bit more sophisticated than that, but that's basically what it is. So we drew the lines and then we got people to start putting up sticky notes. And when we saw how that got traction, and I started to integrate it into some of the slides I shared, back then SlideShare was a big thing. Yes, that's how old I am. That was really fun to watch people just use it. And then when we did new tools, like the value proposition canvas, used it in workshops, watched where people would struggle. We changed the visual interface of that conceptual tool until we really nailed it. So that's the kind of stuff we do, is we just put it out there and experiment in different ways. Back then it was more ad hoc experimentation. Today it's really deliberate experimentation, like Steve Blank and Eric Ries teach it.
That's amazing. You know what fascinates me in what you're doing, and we're going to talk to your new platform about innovation, is the fact that you never sleep on your laurels. I try to translate dormir sur ses lauriers from French to English, but basically you're never satisfied. But I've heard so many people in many industries, but specifically in the meetings and event industry, that said, oh, I've done it this way. Oh, I know how it is because I've done it already. Their mindset is like stuck in Stone Age and they're not looking at reinventing themselves. It looks to me that you keep reinventing yourself all the time. And what was the moment you say you were growing, but not as much as you want? When did you decide to start looking for a new business model for your own business because you were not happy the way it was going?
It's all about impact and change. So one is you look at how well you can monetize, but the other one, what's more interesting is, are you really transforming organizations? So what we had didn't really help transform organizations so they could innovate. So we constantly tried to add the next little piece. Those were conceptual tools at some instances and processes and governance. But on the other hand, we knew that if we want to really be able to scale this in a large organization like a MasterCard, we also need to have a platform. So when we would not see that traction that we hoped to get to, really transform an organization, we just constantly play around, reinvent. And now at one point, you also have to be careful because we put millions into the software platform. It did earn a couple of million, but we've seen there was a ceiling. But we knew, or I knew, there was something more. So I pushed further, continued to invest until we actually found that breakthrough, which was people do not want software. And when I say it's really trivial, what they want are programs that package everything, the process, the tools, the slides, the workshop structures, in a way that it's ultra accessible, like a turnkey solution. So anybody can go from idea to testing to investing into something that works. And that is a no-brainer today, but it took us a couple of iterations to get there. And the yardstick was always adoption and impact. And if we didn't see the kind of adoption and impact that we were hoping for, well, we knew we weren't there yet. And the first one was simply that we didn't have anything recurring, like recurring revenues, recurring challenges. And we found that in 2023, and we started scaling the revenues in 2024. So just always trying to see what's not working, changing that. And sometimes you have to make a radical shift. That's what we did when we shifted from software to programs on top of our software. That was a radical shift. But you also have to be willing to kill stuff. So we killed very profitable businesses inside Strategyzer because they couldn't scale. And we wanted one thing that would really scale. You can't do three things if you're a relatively small organization.
That's amazing. So the focus was there. When do you know when to push or to stop? Because, I'm the kind of guy just like you, Alex, never give up. But sometimes you say, okay, you invest millions and you get some millions, so that's fine. But when do you decide that, you know what? Yes, we haven't got the results that we wanted yet, but I know it's there. Is it obviously guts? But what is the data that you're using? Or is just like pure, I believe in that, it's my intuition, I see because of my experience, and I keep pushing?
Well, there are a lot of factors, but it's also a gradual approach, right? Sometimes people think innovation and entrepreneurship is more like an on-off switch. You experiment, and all of a sudden the lights go on and you found the truth. Well, unfortunately, it's not like that.
I wish.
The data is always contradictory, but they're phases, right? So the first one you start with is a deep understanding, and again, sounds very trivial, but it's not. Deep understanding of customer jobs, pains, or gains. Some people like to call it customer problems. I like a slightly more sophisticated approach. And then in a very detailed way, what are their most important challenges and what are they willing to pay for? So once you understand the customer and which segment of all of these possible segments, for us, innovation could be the entire business world, right? From accelerators to entrepreneurs to large companies to small companies. We had to start to find what's that one segment. That's the first phase. You figure that one out, then it's about the value proposition. Figuring out a value proposition that you can sell to them and that they're willing to pay a certain price for. Again, sounds trivial, but that's the second phase. Now, you might know the customer, you might be able to convert them. That's what you then call product market fit, but that doesn't mean you're going to scale. That's exactly what we had. But then the go-to-market fit is the next thing you need to look at. What are the most effective ways to reach the market? And can you reach a large enough market to get to that next level? So that's the third phase. It's customer fit, solution fit, go-to-market fit, and then you have the entire business model fit when you start to scale. And throughout that whole process, there's not just the business parts in terms of concept, there's also your ability to execute. Can you hire the right people? Are you a good leader? Do you have good product management? So that's then the operational layer, which is also very hard. You can have the best business concept and still fail. In our case, I was a pretty bad CEO, not because I was a maniac or so, but I didn't really embrace the role of CEO and take on the leadership and drive forward and really manage. I thought, I don't want to be a manager. I can't be a manager. Until I had a breakthrough coach. She asked, well, do you want to be a creator of books, of concepts, and stuff that goes to maybe 1 or 2 million in revenues? Or do you want to be an entrepreneur who breaks through to 10, 50, 100 million in revenue? So I made that deliberate choice and I embraced the role of CEO. And then I started to realize, well, I also need to start to hire leaders who I don't tell what to do, because if I tell them what to do, they're probably the wrong people. Product managers who are up to the standard, a great CFO, great salespeople. Again, sounds trivial, but not so easy to hire. So I started to learn I need to interview a lot of people just to know what good looks like, so that when I hire good people. So there's this different, business concept that you test and iterate. And then there's your operational capability of implementing the business model as well. So you have to get a lot of pieces right. That's why, entrepreneurship is hard, because there's more than just an idea. And when people say, oh, it's all about the idea, it couldn't be further from the truth. It's iterating the idea until customers care, until they're buying, until you can scale, and until you have the capability to operationally pull this off. So the one book that I would recommend there is Ben Horowitz's, The Hard Thing About Hard Things. Entrepreneurship is crazy hard. Innovation, maybe even harder to a certain extent, because you're doing it within an existing company and all the kind of antibodies that are coming at you.
I'm listening to you and fascinated. That the first thought I have is another overnight success that is taking 15 years. And then what really I'm very admirative of that is your ability to look at yourself in the mirror, to listen to external coach or whatever, and to reinvent yourself and decide what you're good at, what you're not good at, how you're going to surround yourself with, which quite frankly, again, it might seem simple, but I don't see that in many people. And I think it's part of success to be able to surround yourself with the right people.
I think the first one is working on yourself. So, there's this myth of the creative genius. And of course, some people are better at one thing or at another. Sometimes people succeed by pure luck and despite, who they are and what they do. But most cases, it's really about a person that is going through the hard work, that is working on themselves, figures out how to hire people. It's not that easy and straightforward journey. So there are a couple of myths around entrepreneurship. In my case, I did a ton of work on myself. I did a ton of work on figuring out how to run a business, how to hire people. I wasted a lot of money by doing it wrong. So I can only advise people, join a startup first, watch all the mistakes that others make before you build your own organization. And that's something, if I do something differently, I'd probably try to learn a lot more from others before doing it myself. Because reading about people's mistakes, people telling you what not to do, and then you still do it once you learn it, wow. So there's a lot there, but it's also a fun journey. It's a choice. It's hard, but if you embrace that entrepreneurial journey, there's a lot out there today that you can learn from, instead of reinventing the wheel all the time.
Probably also why it's difficult for parents to teach their kids, and it's better to have somebody outside to tell them, tell the experience.
Well, the thing is, there's interesting stuff out there on this. So I remember meeting Seth Godin, the author and great speaker, and he was saying, well, he deliberately tries to design situations where his kids, I think they're now grown up, how they would fail so that they would learn. So I think we see failure as a bad thing, but actually failure helps you to grow. And I don't think we learn enough to fail and grow. It's this, oh, you need to strive for perfect. Well, you get to perfect by experimenting a lot. And if there's one thing I don't think we're taught, in school, is how to experiment and not fail as a goal, but experiment and, live with the failure, learn from it, and grow in the process. Because you can't learn to be perfect, in particular, in an uncertain world where variables change all the time. Nobody's prepared for anything anymore in this world. I mean, look at what's going on the planet today. There's so many things changing and so many new situations that if you're not prepared to experiment and learn and change, you're going to have a hard time. Change is going to be even more extreme and more the constant now also with AI. It's a bit unfortunate that we're not taught to change all the time. There's no courses on how do I constantly evolve. That's something I believe you can do more systematically.
Absolutely. I always say done is better than perfect, but I don't know anyone that has succeeded without somehow failing and then, getting on your knee and standing up and going forward. It's fascinating to me how, that this participation trophy that you have too many times in society and in school, instead of, like you were mentioning with Seth Godin, creating opportunities to learn. Now you have this new platform. You said you wanted to grow it to 100 million in ARR. Is that what you said?
That's the first goal. I mean, we have to see if we can get there or if we can do better. I think what we're trying to do is interesting because for us, innovation is a use case. How can we help companies? And what's interesting, the way we're doing it today, it's accessible to small companies as well. Programs so that they have a turnkey solution to implement innovation. So if I'm an innovation leader, just got the job in a small company, maybe 100 people, I have to read books and design processes. I don't have time for that. I'll hire consultants. I don't have money for that. So we just hand over the keys for a license fee. You get everything as a turnkey solution. That's for the small companies. And for the large one, it's all about scaling innovation. So we hand over the keys to them so that they become autonomous. We used to do consulting. Now we go in and say, we can do consulting for a year, but there's an Independence Day where we want you to be able to scale innovation across the organization. So with the programs, we're able to help them do that. So we're using innovation as a use case for these kind of organizational transformations. But at the end of the day, the programs we're designing or the platform that allows you to design programs is for any type of change. Oh, I need to implement a new HR process where people need to work differently. Well, you design a program. So there's a really interesting space there, which is not about just learning, is not about just change. It's not just about data management. It's bringing all of this together so you can implement new processes at scale. Or if you're in a small company, get access to world-class processes just like large companies without the consulting.
That's brilliant. And by the way, for those listening now, in the show notes, we're going to insert the link so that they can go and check, which is fascinating what you've built. Now, the same way, going back to the origin where the business model canvas you're using for small business, large business, now you have this platform for innovation in different part of the business. You mentioned small business, 100 people. And yes, especially in North America, I think the small business, according to the Small Business Administration in America, goes to 150 million, which is nice. Now, talking about a lot of people in the meetings and event industry, yes, you do have those companies that size, but you also have a lot of really small business, from solopreneur to maybe 10, 20 people. Is this also something, a tool that they could be using for innovation? And in terms of licensing fee, what's the model that you decided to apply? Because obviously, if you have 10 employees or if you have 500 employees, it's a different opportunity there.
So the innovation programs that we have today on our platform are, $10,000 per team. So it's a bit less likely to apply to a 10-person team if you're in the meeting industry. Now, our goal is constant democratization of these tools. So we're looking at new programs that will go down the price ladder. So you were mentioning Tesla, right? So we're starting with a Model S, going to the Model 3. And so we started with a relatively high price, you would say, but actually it's not. So what SMEs are telling us is, if I have to design all these processes, make all these slides, create all these workspaces, figure this out, or hire consultants, $10,000 is a no-brainer. Now, if you're smaller, if you're a startup, you don't have those $10,000, so it's a bit different story. So all of the tools and the processes, we actually give them away, right? You can find them in our books and you can find them on our website, but packaged as a program so you can implement them as a turnkey solution. That is yet maybe at a price point that is not accessible to micro organizations. But we hope to get there over time. And let's see where this goes. But as the tools, the principles, same thing. This is not, every company has to, reinvent itself if they really, want to stay alive. New value propositions, maybe new business models. I think there's a huge opportunity there. People still don't fully understand business models. So I think it's really worthwhile having a look, unless you're a startup that's thriving and growing on its own. But sometimes, that change comes, disruption, and then all of a sudden you realize, oh, shoot, I don't know. I didn't innovate for a long time. And there are some companies that grow, and they're so focused on growing that they forget at one point, you will need to build those innovation capabilities. And that's for small or large, it's the same thing.
Absolutely. And now for small and large as well is AI. It's everywhere. There's a lot of, on one hand, I see people that, they were specialists in COVID. Now they became specialists in Ukraine, and then they became specialists in politics. And now they're specialists in AI. I mean, those people, I don't even want to hear about them. And then you have the true one, the one using it. How do you incorporate AI in everything you're doing? And how would you advise people to look at their business and then to incorporate AI in saving time and in being able to scale?
I mean, if you look at your own business model, there are just a ton of things where you'll have efficiency innovation. The obvious stuff that's going to happen first, call centers, et cetera. So those are just a no-brainer. And if you don't do them, your cost structures are going to be nowhere near your competitors. You're going to have to do that to simply stay alive. Then what we do is actually integrate AI into our products. So typically, one of the tasks when you start thinking about an idea is sketching out your business model, sketching out your customer profiles. Well, that should be the click of a button, because you can generate a customer profile or a business model with the click of a button. So we're integrating that stuff. The other things that are interesting is, I played with this together with a team of people over the weekend, is automated customer discovery interviews. So you have an agent who starts to call people to learn about your customers. And you'd say, oh, that's crazy. Like, would people even talk? Well, it's even hard to recognize that it's an agent that is interviewing you. And if you give people a reward, they're very likely to participate. So you can come up with an idea in the morning and you can interview 100 people over lunch. And then in the afternoon, you have data to analyze. So the speed of innovation is going to get a lot faster, and it's going to be extremely accessible for extremely small companies. So as an individual, you can interview people over lunch. Think of it. That's something that, from a technology point of view, is already accessible. We're now integrating this as fast as we can into our product, because you want to be able to speed up the innovation process. So that's just in our world. But now think of if you're a CEO, one of the things is how you lead your people. What if, you have AI constantly analyzing your facial expression, your blood pressure, and giving you feedback on how you are in leading your people? Those things are happening. That's not future music. Some of these things are still prototypes, but it's becoming a reality very quickly. And the cool thing is, it's at the fingertips of everybody. This is like Amazon Web Services made the world's best IT infrastructure accessible to developers. Well, today, as an individual, you're starting to have access to, the most powerful and IT infrastructure that exists today, which is AI. And general artificial intelligence is maybe 5 years away. So we're just at the beginning of this. And I'm not one who likes this, it's going to change everything. Well, when you play around with it and you get interviewed by an agent and you can hardly realize it's a human being, wow, that's when you say, there's something there that is really a game changer.
Reassure me, you're real now. I'm speaking to the real Alex, right?
Okay, sorry that you asked. I am actually a bot. Alex is running his company full-time in CEO mode. But so here's the funny thing. You might know Marshall Goldsmith, #1 leadership coach in the planet. So he's a good friend. He was asked by an AI company if he'd be willing to experiment with a digital twin. So of course, Marshall loves experimenting. He said yes immediately. If you ask him today, who's better, Marshall Goldsmith live or his digital twin, he'll immediately tell you his digital twin. One reason, his digital twin speaks 40 languages. That is a game changer. Imagine now as a CEO, you can speak to your local team, Indonesia or in Egypt, in the local language. That is unbelievably powerful. So that is one thing. And then what Marshall also says is, look, I'm getting old. I forget stuff. AI forgets nothing. Now, of course, today, AI still makes mistakes. So it's a bit dangerous. You do have to verify things, but it's getting better literally by the day. So the sky is the limit, which comes also with a huge responsibility for us humans to start to kind of figure out how we're going to regulate this thing, because otherwise it might get dangerous. There are good sides, opportunities, but there's also dangers that come with it.
Absolutely. The example you gave about Marshall Goldsmith is the pun intended, but is the perfect example of what got you here won't get you there, which is his book. But it's fascinating what you're saying. Now, Alex, whether it is managing your team, whether it is using your platform for innovation in any company, where do you see the role of people, still human beings, coming together? I always say that for whatever the business challenge, training people, aligning team, customer relations, motivating people, discovery, science, whatever, people come together. Now, obviously, with AI and innovations, you don't always need to do that. And where do you see the role of in-person, of human being coming together, whether it is to managing a team or applying innovation worldwide?
So it's an interesting question. I have a full remote team. We have one office, but it's more by history. And it's basically my CFO and I who are still in one office. And we're even in 2 different rooms because I'm here in my studio. The rest of the team is full remote. That has its advantages, but it also has its disadvantages. So first question I think that we need to ask ourselves in the meeting industry is, when do you need to physically come together? And when is remote more effective? And then the formats, because I think we still, the meeting industry is terrible at good physical formats and is even worse at good remote formats. So even we are not great at it because it's not necessarily at the top of the whole thing, but we do all hands meetings remotely that we design actively to have work sessions on visual workspaces. And we spend time preparing that to make it engaging, to make it interactive, so we don't just have, 1 or 2 hours of talking heads. That's the worst thing. It's already bad in a meeting room to have 1 hour, or 2 hour talking heads, because you generally talk over each other, across each other, is rarely a communication. There we got a little bit to maybe sticky notes and visual facilitation, but hardly. But in the remote world, it's even worse. So I think in the remote world, there's also coming together, and there's a huge opportunity for the meeting industry there. So it's not just physical, it's also remote. And then there's hybrid. I just don't think we're deliberate about these things yet. So there are technological opportunities there that we need to deliberately, start to address, but with a clear return on investment. When does it make sense to physically come together? What's the use case? When does it really make sense? Not just, oh, I believe everybody needs to come together. That makes no sense, right? Because there's also the environment we want to think of. But when does it not make sense to do the remote thing? And if we go for the remote thing, what kind of remote session is it? And how do we prepare? There's still people who do information sharing in the physical world or in the remote world, which makes no sense. So there's also something there that the meeting industry needs to start to embrace is what about, we use loom.com a lot. That replaces part of the meeting industry, makes it more efficient, effective. That's an opportunity. So there's so many things. My head is spinning when I think of what could be done. And I think this is an industry that has an enormous opportunity to innovate, just with physical remote, but then also bringing in AI to do this the right way. There's just tremendous opportunities for innovation, and I don't see enough of it. I really don't see enough of it. And I don't see enough research going into it or enough business schools teaching you, how do I get the best out of my people? By creating the best meetings, physical, remote, hybrid. When do I do what? How? There's not enough there. And it's not a space I'm following, so it might be wrong. But working with a lot of companies, I haven't seen a lot of stuff that made it into industry.
Absolutely. And I think that's also an opportunity for smaller business to advise their client by being able to deliver on that. And to your point, if you need to share information, fine. And if you want to, for me, negotiating, it's easier when you're in person. Definitely when you want to create unique experience, that doesn't happen online. But also when you're building a team that at some stage coming in person is different. But to your point, what are you trying to achieve and what is best and using then leveraging technology?
I think it's a great opportunity. And if you look at our programs, so when we get people to go through a specific process, one is the process point of view, but then there's also the format point of view. So we really mix between physical meetings in a room where people will use a screen to access the platform, or completely remote meetings or hybrid meetings. And then in between that, preparing for the sessions with the right type of e-learning, but you don't have to jump to a different platform to figure out about the learning. So this brings it all together. So there's stuff there that we need to do more systematically, systems we can integrate to create a wonderful experience. So I think the other thing is, if you take the meeting industry, don't see yourself as an isolated event. Events make no more sense in isolation. Because I'm hearing a lot of people saying, oh, we're tired of these workshops because nothing ever happens. Well, because they're not seen as part of a process. Of course, it's not as black and white. There's stuff there that could really, really be fun to design. So I always see the opportunities. It's maybe my bad habit, but
Great habit.
A lot of stuff to do. A lot of stuff to do.
Wonderful. Before I ask my last question for today, and again, thank you for taking the time. For those who want to reach out to you, obviously they can go on LinkedIn, but your colleague Daniela, and it's going to be in the notes, but I just want to mention it as well here. It's strategyzer.com/business-of-meetings. That's the link that's going to be in the show note that you can see all the great things that you are doing. My last question for today, when we meet a year from now with a bottle of champagne, what are we going to celebrate?
We're going to celebrate that the world hasn't gone under, that we're using AI positively, that we have less conflict in the world, would be my hope. That's number one. On the Strategyzer side, I'd really want to see more evidence of us scaling the organization in the right direction and having an impact with small and large organizations alike. Interesting enough, in our case, we get really, really fast traction with small organizations to implement innovation. So celebrating that we've had more impact, help more companies innovate around the world, that would be a real pleasure, real pleasure.
Power to the small business all the time.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Alex, thank you so much for taking the time. I look forward to seeing you again live and not with your bot or your AI twin.
It was a real pleasure to be with you. And I'll go and talk to my digital twin now.
Thank you for tuning in to the Business of Meeting podcast. I hope you found today's episode valuable. If you enjoyed the show, the most important thing you can do is leave a review and share it with your colleagues. It really helps spread the word. I truly appreciate your support. And if you're ready to take your business to the next level, don't forget to visit eventbusinessformula.com to learn more about how we are helping even business owners like you. Thanks again for listening, and I'll see you next time.